Welcome to Public Palika, urgency that is democracy. The story of democracy is a continuous journey from the concentration of power in a few hands to systems that seek, always imperfectly, to wrest authority with the many. In medieval politics, power was typically tied to birth, the sword, or divine sanction. Monarchies, feudal estates, and clerical hierarchies dominated much of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Kings granted privileges to nobles, peasants and townsfolk lived, labored, and died with little say in how they were governed. Governance was both personal and exclusionary, its legitimacy flowing from family lineage, conquest, or anointment by religious authorities. Yet, even in the Middle Ages, one can find seeds of representative self-government. The Magna Carta of 1215 began to lay the foundations for constitutional rule in England by establishing that the sovereign wasn't above the law and instituting early forms of parliamentary consultation. Across Europe, fledgling assemblies emerged in city-states and kingdoms, designed more to negotiate taxes and privileges than to realize popular sovereignty. Medieval politics, however, remained fundamentally hierarchical, with political participation often confined to elites or specific estates. By the Renaissance and Enlightenment, new philosophical currents, ideas of individual rights, separation of powers, and the social contract began to challenge the old order. The transformation from monarchy and aristocracy to democracy was slow, bloody, and uneven. It was only after centuries of struggle, through revolution, reform, and social upheaval in Britain, France, the Americas, and beyond, that the ideal of government by and for the people gained tangible form.
The necessity of democracy. Democracy's historical necessity arises from an essential tension: the demand for legitimacy in wielding power. Unlike medieval politics, where legitimacy was inherited or divinely ordained, democracy appeals to the universal right of individuals to determine the rules by which they are governed. It comes to prominence in response to abuses of unchecked authority, embodying the principle that no individual or group has a natural right to rule others without their consent. Democratic practice answers the basic need for justice by institutionalizing participation, public reason, and peaceful transitions of power, making it possible for society to correct itself without violence or revolution. It offers mechanisms for accountability, collective decision-making, and the peaceful negotiation of interests and differences. Whenever societies allowed dissent, adopted voting, and established independent courts, they created space for justice to be realized not only as the will of the mightiest, but as the outcome of deliberation among equals.
Democracy under threat, the contemporary crisis. Despite its ideals and historical ascendancy, democracy today faces severe and novel threats. One recurring challenge is that even democracies can become embroiled in deadly conflict. The wars between India and Pakistan, two nations defined as electoral democracies, exemplify how democratic states are not immune to violent escalation. Operation Sindoor, a recent and unprecedented joint military action by India's Army, Navy, and Air Force against terrorist bases in Pakistan, is the latest in a series of confrontations between the two hostile neighbor nuclear nations. This military operation, while targeting terrorist infrastructure, underscores a deeper problem. Democracy does not guarantee peace if institutions are weak, interests clash viciously, or if the idea of otherness is weaponized. Moreover, democracy itself can be wielded as a tool of intervention. The United States' approach to democracy in Iran stands as a stark example. In 1953, the US and Britain engineered a coup that overthrew Iran's elected government. replacing it with an autocratic monarchy, more pliable to Western interests. Later, American efforts to foster democracy in Iran, including financial support for civil society and media campaigns, not only failed to instigate a democratic transformation, but instead hardened authoritarian resistance and threatened reformers, leading to heightened repression within Iran. The ideal of democracy was thus twisted into a justification for regime change or external control, weakening its moral claim. The crisis is compounded by the dramatic shortfall of the United Nations, a body founded to safeguard the rights of peoples and the peaceful settlement of disputes. While the UN was conceived on the democratic promise of equality and justice for all nations, it has routinely failed to uphold these values in practice. Its structure often protects autocracies, enables a tyranny of the majority over minorities, and has become mired in corruption, gridlock, and a lack of moral clarity. The UN's inability to respond to genocides, its selective application of human rights principles, and the power politics of the Security Council have eroded trust in the institution as a true guardian of democratic values. Instead of being a forum for genuine dialogue and global justice, the UN increasingly appears as a stage for power plays by both democracies and dictatorships, further undermining faith in multilateral action.
Why democracy remains desirable. Despite these crises, the principle of democracy endures because it is rooted in the logic of natural justice. At its best, democracy honors every person's right to a voice in shaping the conditions of their existence, offering the broadest possible consent for political authority. It advances the principle of equality under the law, recognizing the dignity of all members of society, not just the favored or the powerful. Even where democracy fails, it fails in ways that make its repair a collective responsibility. Unlike dictatorship or monarchy, democracy institutionalizes peaceful contestation, correction, and renewal. The right to criticize, to protest, and to organize for reform is both a symptom of its health and a means of its self-betterment. Abandoning democracy, as history shows, is to court a return to unaccountable power, a risk not only to justice but to the peaceful cohabitation of plural societies. In the end, democracy's virtue is not that it is perfect, but that it makes perfection a public project, open to all. As the world faces renewed instability, growing authoritarianism, and the breakdown of old institutions, democracy's promise of justice remains, always unfinished, always necessary. It remains the best hope for aligning power with the principle that all should have a say in their fate, and for making government serve rather than subdue the governed. But democracy is not a Western abstraction. In India, it was planted in the soil of plural traditions and grew with its own light. Before we critique, let us understand its unique shape. Moving ahead, let's recap the rise and status of representative democracy in India. Up next, a short recap of electoral politics and representative democracy in India.